recording. Okay, so I'm here with Andy Smith and Arthur DaSilva from Slope. Andy, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll ask Arthur.
Yeah, my name is Andy Smith, and I am the co-founder, formerly CEO, now Chief Strategy Officer of Slope Software. We are a software company that makes actuarial modeling software. I started this company approximately 10 years ago and have been leading it ever since.
And what kind of actuarial modeling?
Life and annuity, any sort of long-term liability models. So we do pension, we do life, we do disability, long-term care, anything with long tails and big asset portfolios backing it is what we do.
Would I use this to do reserving or something?
Yep, we do reserving, we do ALM, we do all of the principles-based reserve calculations, cash flow testing, all the fun stuff.
Okay, forgive me for asking these questions, but my space is health, so this
Yeah.
is this is not my topic. And I've known Arthur for a number of years through the entrepreneurial and innovations section of the SOA. So say hello, Arthur.
Hi, yes, Arthur Silva. I don't know if you need to do a full intro, but I'm a VP of Actuarial at Slope, and since Andy's introduced the company, I don't have to do that, which is great. Less work for me. Um, Before Slope, I had spent over a decade in Deloitte doing actuarial consulting, based out of Toronto. Traveled across various different countries, including the US, the UK, and Germany during that time. And throughout my career, been heavily involved with SOA volunteering. As Ian mentioned, I used to chair the Entrepreneurial Innovation Section Council, and I currently chair the Emerging Topics Community as well, and also involved in other initiatives at the SOA.
Well, that's how we met. And I think you were at Deloitte when we met. So Slope has been maybe the last 3 years or so.
Yeah, about just over two.
Okay. Well done. So I wanted to talk about the topic of entrepreneurship, and I've been either a founder or co-founder of 5 companies, all of which I've sold successfully. And it bothers me a bit that actuaries are not entrepreneurial. I work in health, and I'm on the boards of several incubators, mostly universities, incubators for medical ideas, medical startups. And I find doctors to be very creative and entrepreneurial. They're always thinking of stuff that they can commercialize, products that they can develop. And I think that's different than actuaries. And I'm curious why this is so for actuaries and how one might inspire more entrepreneurship amongst actuaries. Andy?
Yeah, so as far as why, I do think it has a lot to do with the industry in which actuaries generally work and the way that we're brought up and the way that we're trained in this industry. A lot of what we do is spend time around being a risk-averse population, which is anathema to anything that you want to do from an entrepreneurial type of process. You know from starting your own companies, that's a big jump to have to take and start a company, and it's really a move away from the comfort zone of most actuaries that work in this industry. The other problem that I see is that the opportunity for entrepreneurship kind of limits the way actuaries are used in a lot of ways. Like the obvious answer for someone who wanted to be an entrepreneur is, oh, let me go start an insurance company because that's what I do, work at a brand new insurance company. The problem is that new insurance companies are not always the most popular with customer base because insurance kind of prides itself as being this legacy stalwart piece of the industry. And having been around for 150 years means you're a good insurance company. Having been around for 1 year is a very questionable thing when you're looking at particularly long-term risk products. I mean, it probably works fine for, PNC and other products that are 6-month, 1 year term. If you're looking at a life product or an annuity product and you're giving your money over to someone for the next 50 to 70 years, do you want the guy that just spun up a company in his the back of his office, or do you want the company that's been here for 150 years doing this and being the trustworthy name in that industry? And so I think that creates a problem for people that want to start in the insurance sector, that they have to find other ways to be creative around solutions. And my personal path was technology. Like I was working in an insurance company before I started this company, and the technology was just decades old, older than I was at the time that I was working with it. And I saw that as a problem personally that I needed to solve and that no one else was solving on behalf. And I'm either brave enough or dumb enough to have taken that jump to go and start my own company to start doing it. And it's how do you get people into a place where they're comfortable enough to take that risk to go out and try to build something, uh, and can you build enough support structures around it to help them in that process? Because it is very difficult. And if you talk to anyone who started their own company, it has been a difficult journey for them at some point along that line. And they have had to bring in some sort of support structure to be able to be successful, except in a very few rare instances, they just got lucky.
Yeah, I don't think you need to start an insurance company. My companies were all healthcare data, healthcare analytics companies, and
Sure.
yours
So
are the one.
technology is the
Yeah.
opportunity for you.
So
Yeah.
there definitely are opportunities, I think, and actuaries who are practicing in that insurance environment should be able to see those opportunities. You
Yes.
saw one, and you seized it, but I think that's rare. And I think there's another reason for it, and that is that actuaries in insurance companies or wherever they work are well paid. And it is really hard to give up that guaranteed nice paycheck to go to work for yourself for nothing with no guarantee of revenue for years.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good theory, but you started this whole conversation by saying doctors are great entrepreneurs. And as far as I know, doctors are really well compensated as well.
I think some of that is because they do it on the side. And I remember being part of a panel at DSOA about whether you can successfully start a company on the side when you have a main job. And my theory on that one is no, that you really have to dedicate yourself to it. I think a lot of the doctors, I don't know, doctors somehow or other manage to do this. And maybe they do it when they're young and starting out or something.
Yeah.
The doctors I work with on these boards tend to be medical students or whatever, residents or something like that. So they're not yet sucked into the high paying medical profession. So that's easier for them. But
Yeah.
I'll say one other thing, and that is I also am a professor at the University of California, and I'm finding not a lot, but every year, one or two of my students will come and ask me about how I became an entrepreneur because they're thinking about what they might want to do. And I think that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if the actuarial career path, at least at traditional carriers, self-selects a little bit in terms of the types of people going into the career. Because usually the advice is that I hear or see on like online is, all right, just take your exams and you'll get these pay raises at set periods of time, and that will come with promotions. And it's very clearly defined pathway, and like the type of people that are attracted to that are, I think, very different mold than the types of people that are looking to start their own company and like have an entrepreneurial idea to solve a problem and take on that uncertainty. So I think that's also a piece of it too.
So Arthur, how did you come to give up a highly paid career at Deloitte and go work in this less certain environment of Andy?
I think it's just being passionate about a problem and wanting to do more like that's outside of a traditional actuarial type of career. Like I think I've always wanted to do something with technology, and I couldn't really find a lot of space for that in traditional like companies. And if it was there, there wasn't enough of it to have like openings that I could find like left, right, and center. So I think part of that is just the fact that insurance companies are also using very old technology. So that's so finding the right career that is working on cutting edge stuff was very difficult. And maybe that's opened up now with more like data science type of roles or insurtech startups. But when I was looking even 2 years ago, like there still wasn't a lot of that on the life side. On the health side, probably a little bit more. PNC side, definitely more, but on the life side, definitely quite lacking at the time.
Yeah, well, I began my career in London more than 50 years ago. And the insurance company I worked for did not have computers. So everything was done on cards. And I was in valuation for a while. In those days, they were triennial valuations because it took 3 years to go through the whole book of business of the company. But things have advanced since then, I'm sure. Let me say one of the things that I would like to try to foster at the SOA, and I thought the entrepreneurial and innovation section was trying to do this, and I know they have webcasts and they have other resources for entrepreneurs, but I'm looking for ways or thinking about ways where we can promote or support entrepreneurs. The way that for example, at UC San Francisco, I'm on the board of the Rosenman Institute. The Rosenman Institute has a whole collection and infrastructure of resources that if you want to start a company, you can connect with lawyers in Silicon Valley. You can connect with accountants. You can connect with IT people. You can just connect with whoever you need to support you. If the SOA doesn't have, to my knowledge, doesn't have really this sort of support network. And I think something like that could be useful to encourage entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think building out the network of resources that you would need to have in a startup, even if it's just a curated list of here are good partners for you to go and have a conversation with when you need X solution of a new company that you're starting. But that is not something that I've seen that the SOA has, and that's something that I had to go and find through other sources when I started my company. So you don't think about it when you've got a great idea that you want to go and build a company for. I started this company knowing that I wanted to build a actuarial modeling solution. And then it occurs to me later is, oh yeah, I also have to be a payroll provider for my employees, and I have to have a legal department, and I have to do compliance stuff, and all of these other processes that go with starting a company that people don't really think about. And I had no idea how to do any of that. So I had to go and find the resources and build the network myself in order to know who to talk to have those sort of support structures. And even just having a resource of, hey, here's a great law firm that works with small companies. Go talk to one of these guys. They can help you with the paperwork to get filed and incorporated as a company to start doing business.
Yeah, something I do tell mostly the students that come to me for advice, but anybody. I had a conversation, I'll tell you about a conversation I had with a friend from China 2 days ago, is that when I started my companies, I always did not want to pay for lawyers. I consider lawyers to be highly paid, and I'm just throwing away money. And it's a decision that I've always regretted. And my advice is, just about the first person you need to speak to is a lawyer, and don't regret paying for legal advice, because it's a thicket, a minefield, and you better do it right.
And it will cost you a lot more later if you get it wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing I really think that the SOA could do that would help is find a way to connect people that want to try this. I do highly recommend having a partner or someone else to start a company with, because doing it solo is even harder than doing it with someone else. And I was very fortunate that I knew the person that started my company with me. I had known him for years before. And I'll tell people to this day, when I went and thought about starting a company, I was not going to do it by myself. And I went down and I made a list of people that I was willing to start a company with that had the complementary skills that I was missing. And that list ended up being one person that I knew in my personal network. And I was terrified to even ask him, because he was also in a well-paid job doing software development. And if he had said no, this company would never exist. I would not have taken that leap on a solo basis. And I think there's probably a lot of people that don't know how to find other like-minded people that are willing to try this and form those connections to have an initial idea together. And maybe you find 2 or 3 people that you can stick together, and that combination is what you need to successfully start a business.
So that's fascinating because, you know, we talked about the network of the kinds of advisors that you need and this idea of connecting people. And that was really the mission of the entrepreneurial and innovation section of the SOA, which, Arthur, I'm not sure if that still exists. Has that become part of a community now?
They're in the middle of that transition, and I'm struggling to remember which one they're joining. So, but yes, that.
So they'll become part of a community. But I think at one time there was a curated list of some of these kinds of services that the E&I section had on its website, but I don't know whatever became of that. And I think I agree with Andy. I think something like that would be valuable. The idea of connecting people, though, I think is a little bit bigger. And you're not going to like this, Andy, but I'll float my idea just so you can shoot it down.
Sure.
What I've been talking about at the SOA is trying to find a way to do something like what my Rosenman Institute at UCSF does. It's more than just a funder of some of these startups, although they do give seed money. They have competitions, people apply. They've done over 100 grants to some of these seed grants, and some of them have been very successful, actually. So it's a model that's run for about 15 years. It works. I give advice on, I'm there to give advice to the doctors about, before you start thinking about clinical stuff, think about how you're going to get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so they've got the network, but they've also been able to raise outside money to run these kind of seed grants. And I know you don't like this idea, but I think if the SOA did something like this, where they could really get a group together of outside advisors of this kind and run some little sort of small seed fund grants to entrepreneurs, that it might help a little bit to get actuaries thinking more about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think if the dollar amounts are small enough, the part I've always worried about with the SOA running like a grant program or like a more venture capital structured idea is the SOA becoming a backer, supporter, and potentially owner of specific ideas in the industry. And the idea of that, I think, runs into problems with the mission of what the SOA is trying to do and trying to be. And I think if you can do something that is independently separated enough from what the SOA does, and the SOA is a supporter on resources and information only, and not into ownership and giving money directly to companies, that something like that is feasible to me.
Yeah, I think, you know, this idea I've been batting it around at the SOA, and there's a little bit of interest in it because the SOA, one of its whole functions now, and as part of its plan for the next couple of years, is innovation. And there's somebody at the SOA who's in charge of innovation who's been thinking along the same lines. So this is not just Ian's idea. The Ian's crazy idea. The idea, though, they recognize that this is not going to be a real SOA thing. It has to be an outside thing because the SOA doesn't have the resources or the expertise. Yeah. So they're going to have to assemble some sort of outside advisors. Same thing with UCSF and the Rosenman Institute. They don't know from anything. They can provide connection to the medical profession who have these ideas, but it's really us outsiders who are running the institute.
Right. Yeah, and so something that's independent like that certainly works. It's how do you get the SOA to sponsor the building of that, and what can they put in front of people who are interested in entrepreneurship to lead them towards that end goal?
So when you started your company, did you go for investment right away?
I did not actually. I built my company for 4 years before I ever went out to raise venture capital for growth.
And
So I
presumably you didn't pay yourself.
not a lot. I did manage to not starve to death.
So
So
I'll make a very quick comment because I'm old enough to take a Social Security pension. And when I was building my companies for a few years, I didn't take a paycheck.
yeah,
And that actually hurts your Social Security paycheck because you have these years with zeros
yep.
for what that's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I spent many years earning far less than I had been making working for an insurance company. In fact, I'm still making less than I probably would have made at an insurance company here today. And it's about a different growth mindset of the value that I have built is in the company itself and the ownership
Yeah.
that I have of the organization.
And at some point you get rewarded for that value. And one of the values of having a lawyer earlier than I did is that you can structure the company in such a way to minimize your taxes on that payout.
That's correct. And that is extremely important that you do.
Extremely important.
Yes. And that's, those are the sort of things that when you first start a company, if you don't do your research well or talk to the right people, you would never know. And by the time you learn about it, it's way too late for you to take advantage of opportunities like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so when you went for capital, what I found was I didn't have the network or the connections to really find VCs and private equity.
Yeah. And it was largely the same for me. That I did not have the network and I had to build it from scratch, which is an enormous amount of work. It is a second job on top of the full-time job of running and building a company
Yeah. Yeah.
already to go out and raise that and build that network of people. And that is hard for a lot of folks because it really is a sales-minded operation. The same as, going out and selling whatever it is you're building and what you're trying to do. You're selling your company now to other people to get them to invest into what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. And in the actuarial world, that is really, really hard because almost all those conversations start with, what's an actuary? What do you guys do? So
I guess I would.
explaining what we did was one of the hardest things I had to learn when I first started talking to venture capital companies.
That's interesting because I selected investors to speak to who already knew something about actuaries. I didn't have that problem. I had a lot of problems trying to explain what it was we were doing, though.
Yes.
And in the end, I'll tell you what happened in the end because it's different than you. I was unsuccessful in raising money, and in the end, I'm glad because I'm just too old to be working for a VC. And fortunately, I got introduced to a guy who had started a company to do exactly what we did and made an offer for the company, and I sold. So as I said, I was I was too old. And I think that's something that I didn't realize when I started talking to investors is you're basically going to become a slave to the investors.
I'm actually going to disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah, that is an outcome that can occur. So I'm not going to disagree that that is a reality for many owners and starters of companies. I took the approach that who I brought onto the cap table of the company and who I allowed to invest in this company was something that I was going to personally gate so that I only allowed people to invest who I personally was willing to work with and for, and was not going to end up a slave to the investors, as you have put it, because I have heard so many horror stories now from other people who've started companies that have ended up in that situation. And I am not in that position at all. I go to the board meetings with all of our investors and I sit down, and that's probably one of the most fun meetings that I have in the course of a month or a quarter when we meet, sitting down with the investors and chat with them, because they're all really, really good people.
Yeah.
And we were very careful about how we selected them. And I even said no to better financial offers because I didn't like the people who were going to end up on the board of the company.
Yeah, so I'm on the board of the buyer, and I will say I enjoy the board meetings, and they're smart people, and I've learned a lot from listening to the way investors approach it, as opposed to the way that founders or actuaries approach the problem.
Yes.
It's been a good learning experience.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and things worked out. As I say, I'm just not ready to have another full-time job.
Understood.
Yeah. Now,
So,
Andy, like, I wanted to hear though, like, if you were to do this all over again, would you have done it the same way and not gone for funding? So like, not gone for funding for that many years. Like, would you have done things differently? And like, what would you have wished you
Oh,
had as a resource starting over?
yeah. If I could do it, there's a lot of things I would do differently now that I've learned about starting a company and building a company, because there's so much I just didn't know about it. I was certainly very naive when I started the company. I saw a problem and I figured if I built it, people would buy it, and that's not how things work. So you really have to go out there and you have to be able to sell something. You have to be able to market it. You have to be able to find your way to your buyer. And there's a lot that I could have done better in the early days with the company that I think if I went back and did it. Now with the fundraising, it's interesting because money is the lifeblood of a startup. It was very much, what do we need to get to the next stage? Do we need to hire more people ahead of when we've sold this? And the question is always, if you did a better job on selling up front, maybe you didn't need additional capital, or maybe you should have raised additional capital and tried to grow faster uh, in this. I think the way that I raised money and the way that we've gone about this, I've been very happy with. We have done not a huge amount of fundraising, but not zero fundraising either. And that has ended up with a really good balance of bringing in some new network into the company and some different perspectives into the way that we've done things that I think have been helpful for the way that we grew.
that's interesting. I'm thinking back to what you said about your partner, your co-founder. I think one of the things that I was very lucky in all of my companies about was finding really good people. And in a way, they found me, which is sort of different. But certainly in the last company, my co-founder, the guy who really ran the company, was one of my former students who came back and said, I want to work for you.
That's
And that's not the first time that's happened.
yeah.
And these kinds of people, I've just been so fortunate with the kinds of people who wanted to work with us. It's been really the thing that really got the companies going. But the other thing I would say, the main thing I would do differently, to be perfectly honest, is I would start my first company at 30, not 50.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
you've
I
got to
could.
do it when you're young and energetic.
It does take a lot of effort, and I was about that age when I started this, so I guess I'm doing that part right.
Well, there you are. Look how far you're well ahead of me in age. So Arthur, thinking about the E&I section, how do we go about creating more of a network? Is it something that we should, you're chair of what, the emerging issues, or what's it called?
Now it's emerging topics community. It's
Okay. Is this something that we should be talking about at emerging topics?
It's a good question now. Like, I mean, emerging topics is focused on like modeling technology and predictive analytics slash AI. So it's I would say tangentially related, given that most new companies now are technology focused or AI focused. So entrepreneurial innovation is it's going to be part of the career development community now. So it's kind of a blend between those two still, I would say. Um, in terms of what was existing as resources, there used to be regular meetings with like people looking to kind of check their ideas and they needed to talk to an actuary, I would say those were loosely attended, but every once in a while you get someone like outside of the industry that would attend these types of meetings, and they would talk to one of our actuaries, and there were some interesting conversations there. I think other resources they had were on like, oh, how do you approach fundraising? There was a connection to a website called LegalZoom, which provided some kind of boilerplate legal templates for a much cheaper cost than a lawyer. I don't know if they still have that, but that was existing at the time when I was chairing the E&I section. So there's probably a lot more that could be done. I know during my time there, we didn't update the resources page that much. So maybe there's something around that that could be done going forward.
I think the other thing that we probably need to do, I used to do this years ago when the section was still called smaller consulting firms, is just publish successful entrepreneur stories. And I think yours and Andy's is a good story. So I'm really glad that we have this interview to post. Yay. We should do more of it. And I think there are probably others. So if you think of others that it would be good to speak with, let me know, because it's something we should just promote more of.
I 100% agree. Like more entrepreneurial stories, more stories of actuaries in innovative roles, whether it's an actuarial one or not. I just don't think we see enough examples of that in the public.
Yeah.
And there's probably more than we might actually have expected. We just don't know they're out there. I'll keep that in mind. I think I know someone that recently started like a data science community, or not community, consulting company, for example. I need to check in with him. So and then there's a bunch of people that have started like startup carriers. I don't know if that counts for your particular purpose, but
hey, it's a startup.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we can certainly make that connection for you. Well, I'll definitely keep that as a takeaway.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's really good to talk with you. And Andy, I don't think in the end we're that far apart in terms
of
the way the SOA can support this.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you have any closing advice for our young actuarial entrepreneurs, now's your chance.
Yeah, so I would say for anyone who's thinking about the entrepreneurial path, give it a shot, because that's the only way it ever happens. And it's scary, and there's ups and downs in it, but it is the most rewarding thing that I have ever done in my career.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Andy. Thank you, Arthur.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Yeah. And thank you, Ian. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.